everyone, welcome to another video. This is my August wrap-up, and I have quite a few DNFs this month, unfortunately, so let's go ahead and get those out of the way. The first one is That Prince Is Mine, and this is a romance novel, and it's not, I don't know, it's just not the kind of romance I like, I guess, or that I have to really be in the mood for, because the writing style was just not for me. This is written in modern times, but the prince and his cousins sound like old-timey princes, and sometimes that can be fun and quirky, but it just wasn't working for me this time. I just kind of found it a little grating to my nerves. And then when they first meet, the prince and the girl, like all the attraction stuff is like completely over exaggerated, which just made it feel cheesy. So I only got a few chapters in before I realized that this just really isn't going to work for me, and I decided to DNF it. The next one was Glass Houses, and this one sounded really intriguing and interesting because it sounded like it was going to be a locked room mystery and maybe a survival story, but oh, no, 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 no. Not only did I not like the writing, I felt like the writing itself was pretty mediocre, but these characters were insufferable. I have never read a book where I hated every single character as much as I hated these people. And the dialogue just wasn't believable and stilted, and this one I did not like from the get-go, so I very quickly DNF'd this one. And then we have The Housekeeper's Secret. And I love things set in Victorian England. I think it's fascinating. And so I thought this one was going to be fun. But I don't know. I thought that was going to be more of a mystery. Like, I knew it was going to be heavy on the romance, but I thought there'd be a little bit of a mystery that would be intriguing. And to be honest, it didn't really have a lot of romance or mystery. Like, I got 25% in and nothing interesting or intriguing has happened at all. There was no like attraction, there was no like mystery, there was nothing really going on. The writing itself was really good. Like, the writing was phenomenal, and they obviously did their homework and did a lot of research into Victorian England, and I really appreciated that. When I'm reading historical fiction, I do like to be immersed in that world. And so I think the author did a good job in that aspect. But the story itself was just really slow and really boring. And I couldn't even keep all the characters straight, even though there wasn't like a ton of characters, but just nothing was interesting enough that would get my memory to remember that character, I guess. And so even the main character, I couldn't figure out who she was because they kept calling her like Mrs. something, which usually your main character isn't just categorized as Mrs. whatever. That's not usually how you classify your main character, because we're supposed to be in her head. Well, we were in both of their heads. It wasn't just from the main character's perspective, but I think that's why I was so confused, because I'm like, wait, is Mrs. Ferguson or whatever her name is that the main character? Is that the housekeeper? Like, I couldn't even remember who the main character was. And so I'm just like, eh. So yeah, after about 25% in, I just finally gave up. This one's gonna make a lot of people upset, I'm sure, but the next one I DNF'd was I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. I just don't get along with his writing style. I find it a bit confusing, and I just don't get along with it very well. And to be honest, I could tell from the beginning that this was going to be a very character heavy book. And I'm more of a plot driven reader, if I'm being honest. Sometimes character driven stories can work for me if the main character is like extremely interesting and well rounded and different things. So it can work, and it has worked. But in this case, I just couldn't connect with him. I couldn't connect with the story. I didn't like the writing style. So yeah, this was a DNF for me. And then we have The Monstrous Kind. This is a YA fantasy novel. And I don't know, this one was hard because I went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth of really liking it and being bored. And then I'd really like it again, and then I'd be bored. And then I'd really like it again, and then I'd be bored. And it took forever to reach the 50% mark. And so when I finally got there, it was like, I'm not sure I even want to finish this, because I was getting to the point where I was starting to skim. And when I get to that point when I'm starting to skim, it means I just want the book to be over and done with and move on. So I'm like, if that's how I feel about this book, then why even bother finishing it, to be honest? So I decided to give up on this one. And this one is also a book that takes place in, well, I want to say it takes place in Victorian England, but it's not. It's like Victorian times, but it's its own place. But they do use a lot of terminology that you would use, like Sussex and stuff. But at the same time, they call it like the toast instead of the ton and stuff. And you could tell it's kind of like Victorian England adjacent because it's fantasy. But anyways, I did enjoy that aspect. And you had like these great houses that were immune to this fog that kind of took over the whole land and it turned you into like monsters. And so the people that had blood in their veins that, you know, would keep them safe were part of these manor houses, and it's their job to protect the rest of the population. But there was certain plot holes I felt with this already because there was like somebody that died from the fog that I thought was supposed to be immune. So I don't know. I felt like that aspect of the story was a little inconsistent. And I don't know, like I said, there'd be a chapter that was really good, and then the next couple of chapters would be pretty boring, and then I'd have a really good chapter again. And so I just couldn't consistently hold my attention. But good idea, good premise, but just didn't quite stick the execution for me. So a lot of these books that I DNF'd happen to be NetGalley arcs, and I think I'm going to be done with NetGalley arcs, or at least scale way back, because I find myself lately DNFing a lot of them. And I wonder if it's because I'm forced to read them at a certain time, and so I might not be in the mood for them, or I feel so much pressure, you know, because I didn't realize when I first started with NetGalley that a lot of the books that I was interested in were all coming out within like a couple of months of each other. Like in the summer, you get a crap ton of books, or, you know, the beginning of January or whatever, you know. And so all of these books were all coming out at the same time. And so this month and then next month, it's like I had all of these arcs ready and I needed to review them. I have 4 more that I need to do for next month. And so I think it just, you know, the pressure combined with not being perhaps in the mood and being forced to read it instead of something I actually wanted to pick up, I think was hindering my enjoyment of these books. And so I'm just like, I don't think NetGalley Arcs is a good choice for me because I already have obligation reads when it comes to like book club books and books that I need to read for my channel. And so I don't know, it's starting to make reading feel like work, and I don't want that. Reading should never be a chore, it should just be enjoyable. So I think once I read the 4 for next month, I think I'm going to be done with NetGalley. So anyways, a NetGalley arc that I didn't DNF would be Given Our History, which is another romance book. And this isn't my favorite trope. This is like the friends to lovers trope, which isn't really my favorite. And it's kind of a second chance romance as well. And neither of those tropes are something that I gravitate towards. But I don't know, there was something about this book that just kept me reading and kept me invested and kept me interested. And I really enjoyed the characters a lot. I thought they were really fun. So I would give this book 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. And it's a good time to read it too because it's very academic focused. And so it's the perfect read for like September, fall time, because it was all about college and school, and they were professors and different things. And then towards the end of the book, then it's Halloween time, and then it was Christmas time. And so this really is the perfect time to read this book. So that was a bonus. And then speaking of book club books, my book club book for this month was Ghost Camera by Darcy Coates. Ghost Camera is a novella that she wrote towards the beginning of her career, like, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. But it's been out of print for a while, but I guess people have been requesting it, and so they decided to re-release it. But Darcy begged the publishing house to let her turn it into a short story collection, so it wasn't just the novella, and she felt like her readers would get more bang for their buck. She combined this novella with some short stories, and then she wrote a bonus novella at the end of the collection that kind of goes along with the original Ghost Camera. So I thought that was a good idea, and it was really fun, and Darcy Coates always sucks me in. I always enjoy her books. Short story collections aren't necessarily my favorite, but I will read them from Darcy Coates because she's my favorite author. And I did enjoy this one. I gave it 4 stars. Okay, and then I also read Two Sides to Every Murder by Danielle Valentine. I really enjoyed her How to Survive Your Murder book, and so when this came out, I was really interested. This is one of my most anticipated books for the year, and I really wanted to read it in the summertime, and I almost didn't make it, but luckily it's really short, so I was able to just slip it in, even though I did have a lot of NetGalley arcs, and it also helped that I DNF'd a bunch of them. But anyway, so I was excited to finally read this one. And this one was really fun. I really enjoyed it, but you can't take it too seriously. It's not meant to be this brilliant literary masterpiece or anything. This is just very campy, very cheesy, very YA, but just fun, and that's all I expected from it was just a camp slasher, which is essentially what I got. It did have some romance in there. I swear you can't be YA without having romance, which I'm okay with. Honestly, I like romance in my books, but it's extremely, extremely fast. Like it's insta love, basically, and it's pretty cheesy. But I don't know. I still thought it was fun. I still liked the inclusion of it. And, for such a short book, this author really stuffed a lot in here. And it kind of gave me Parent Trap vibes, but combined with a slasher. So yeah, this isn't perfect by any means, but I just thought it was fun. I just thought it was fast paced and, just a good campy time. So I'd probably give this 4 stars. And then I got a couple of books from the library. First one is Eye of the Beholder by Emma Bamford. And this is a take on Vertigo by Alfred Hitchcock, and that's what made me interested in reading this in the first place, which kind of made it predictable in a way, because if you've seen the movie, then, you probably can guess the twists. And I actually just barely watched Vertigo for the first time a few weeks ago, so this came out at the perfect time. So I didn't completely fall head over heels for this one, but I did enjoy it. I did like it. I'd probably give it about 3.5 stars. It didn't knock my socks off, but it didn't make me want to DNF it, and I thought the writing was good. But again, it was kind of predictable, so I was just kind of waiting to hit those plot points. But unfortunately, I just don't really have that much to say about this one, other than it was, kind of in the middle. Like, I didn't hate it, didn't love it. It was just a way to pass the time, I guess. And then I got Slow Dance by Rainbow Rowell. This is the first book I've read by this author. And I think her writing style is really good and really digestible and really easy to read. And it actually reminded me a lot of Given Our History that I also read this month, just because it's also a friends to lovers romance. And so in a lot of ways, the plot was very similar, because you always get the flashbacks of them being friends and them, having their history together and everything. And so in that way, the plots were really similar. But that was really the only thing that was the same. I mean, obviously the characters were different. The main character, Shiloh, drove me nuts. I found her very obnoxious, and I just couldn't see reading a whole book about her. So unfortunately, yeah, this just wasn't for me. The last book I'm going to talk about that I read this month, I saved for last because I have a lot to say about it, and that's The Nesting by CJ Cook. And this was a buddy read that I read with a friend of mine, and I feel bad because the first 2/3 of this book I really enjoyed. I really was liking it a lot. The mystery was intriguing. I was connected to the main character. The writing was good. I loved the atmosphere and the setting, and there was some good creepy visuals. Everything was going really well. But as we got towards the end, and then the very end came, I was like, don't think it really stuck the landing. It was too fast paced. It just kind of barreled ahead. And so it didn't feel satisfying. And there was some inconsistencies and some plot holes. And so I was just like, eh. So then I had my discussion with my friend. And the more we talked about this book, the less I liked it, and the more problems I found with this book. So not only was it riddled with plot holes and inconsistencies, which made some of the characters honestly useless to the story, but not only that, but the writing itself was a bit problematic at times, because in the flashback chapters, for some reason, the author wanted to head hop a lot and go into other perspectives. And so you'd be reading a paragraph and it's all in the wife's point of view, and then it would switch to the husband's point of view for like a page, and it would switch back to hers just like out of nowhere, and it would do that over and over again, and it was annoying. And then there was one chapter out of nowhere where the author started doing like a narrator, omniscient point of view, where the main character wasn't even in the room, she was in the bathroom, but yet she was like narrating the story of what was happening in the other room, even though she couldn't possibly hear it. So even though before this it had been in first person when it was in the main character's point of view. So that was really strange. I don't know why she decided to write it that way, but there was just a lot of unanswered questions by the end. A lot of it was too ambiguous for me. And we kind of mutually agree that the consequences didn't make sense because all of the male characters that were despicable and they deserved to have a bad ending and bad consequences for the things that they had done got away scot-free. But then the women in the story, they all got these dire consequences when they didn't do anything. And so I just thought that was not satisfying. There's a certain point where you kind of want the bad guys to have some consequences and the good guys to, make it out better. And I'm not saying that it always has to. I mean, when you're dealing with thriller and horror novels, a lot of times it's not going to have a happy ending. And not everything is going to be tied up in a neat bow, and not everybody's going to get the consequences that they deserve. And I completely understand that. But at the same time, there has to be some level to it. Not every single character needs to have the consequences that they deserve, but at least one or two of them do, I think. As the reader, that's what's most satisfying for me. It just didn't seem right or fair, and I didn't like it. But the nail in the coffin of this book was the fact that the prologue starts out with a murder, and then at the end, when you finally get to that murder scene, it happens completely differently, which I feel like the reader got lied to. And as an author myself, I feel like that's a huge no-no, that the author is not supposed to lie to the reader. Because if you're thinking back to the beginning and this murder and trying to figure it out, and then you get to the end and, oh, wait, but something completely different happened, like that's not a red herring. That's just being lied to. Like, it wasn't a matter of perspective or anything. It just happened completely differently. And I can't believe an editor would just not catch that, just let that slide. But I don't know. So this was going to be a 4-star read. And then the more we talked about it, well, no, it was going to be a 4-star read. And then I got to the ending, didn't like the ending. So I was like, okay, maybe a 3.5. But then the more I talked about it with my friend, the more I was like, I think this needs to be more of a 2. So that's what I'm going to land on, is a 2-star for this one. Normally I only do a 1-star if I DNF it or if I really actively hate a book. But like I said, I did enjoy this one for the most part until the ending, when nothing was resolved and all these plot holes came to light. So yeah, bummer. This is my first book by this author, and I will read other books from her just to see if she got better, because I don't know if this is her debut. I almost don't think it is, but I just want to see if she stuck the landing better on some of her other books, because I do think she is a good writer, and I do think that it started out really good. She just didn't know how to end it. So I'm curious to read more and see if she figured it out. So anyways, that's all the books I have for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know. And please let me know in the comment section below which one of these books you've read and enjoyed, or which ones you've read and didn't like. And please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.